Please join us for a dinner at the Harrison family estate at Raid. We desperately need your presence, my assistant Marcus. As I turned the invitation over in my hand, are you going? As I turned the invitation over in my hand, are you going? I leaned back in my chair and looked out over the Manhattan skyline from my corner office. Marcus, what do you think? Marcus said, placing a thick folder on my desk. Everything was ready for the board meeting next week. I nodded, still staring at the invitation. Have you seen the latest numbers from Harrison Technologies? Your sister's latest product launch was a disaster. There's a rumor they won't be able to make payroll next month. Jessica, my perfect sister, she always did well in our father's eyes. When he kicked me out of the house, my sister didn't say a word in my defense, booked me a flight to Boston, and I said, finally, we'll see what they want. Harrison Manor hasn't changed in 15 years. Same manicured lawn, same imposing stone facade, same old money and old expectations. As my car pulls into the circular driveway, I see that other vehicles are already parked there. Jessica's Range Rover, my father's Bentley. Marcus insisted on having a car waiting for me, just in case. He said, smart man, the butler wasn't the same one I had as a child, and he opened the door before I knocked. Miss Harrison, he greeted me formally. I corrected him. His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. Of course. I'm so sorry, Miss Chan. Our whole family is waiting in the study. I straightened my channel jacket and followed the butler down the familiar hallway. The walls were covered with family photos, Jessica's graduation photos, her wedding photos, her taking over as CEO. My face was obviously not among them. All traces of my presence had been carefully removed. The door to the study stood open, and inside my father sat behind his massive desk. Looking older than I remembered but still exuded authority, Jessica sat on the leather sofa. Her designer clothes didn't quite hide her nervous, fidgety look. In one corner my mother sat quietly. Just as she had the day I left Olivia, my father said, how could you refuse when the great Richard Harrison asked for your presence? Jessica was taken aback by my tone. My father's jaw tensed even more, but he continued, please sit down, we have much to discuss. I chose an armchair near the door and waited with my legs crossed. The silence was uncomfortable. Please, this is the first time my mother has spoken and we're trying to talk in a civilized way, and I laughed. Like the civilized way you guys sat there when my father kicked me out, or the civilized way you've pretended for 15 years that I don't exist. And I looked at my sister seriously for the first time. The perfect blonde haircut as flawless as ever, but with shadows under her eyes, the muscles in her shoulders taut from running a failing company. It didn't look good on her, and I asked her why I was here. He sighed heavily and looked nothing like his 65 years. Harrison Technologies is in trouble, and we need your help. He didn't apologize or acknowledge the pain they were causing, just another business deal. My help? I keep a neutral voice. What kind of help? We've seen everything you've done at Phoenix Industries, he said. Innovation, growth. We need to Harrison Technologies to think like that. I almost laughed out loud. They have no idea how close they came to having no voice at all. Let me get this straight, I said. I've stood here for 15 years. I've been a disappointment to the family, someone who doesn't understand business, someone who doesn't deserve the name Harrison. Jessica protested and said things are different now. I turned to her and I said, different? How is it different? Because you failed at your job, you were put on a silver platter because you couldn't be held accountable. I reached for my briefcase and pulled out the merger documents. It was a generous offer, Dad, but I have a counteroffer. I put the documents on his desk and watched him pick them up. His face turned pale and I said calmly, is this the hallmark of Harrison Technologies? Phoenix Industries has been buying up shares through various subsidiaries for months now. At the board meeting next week, we will have a controlling interest in your company. Jessica snatched the file from her father's hand, and her eyes scanned it frantically. It's not possible. There's no way you can't do what I'm asking for. There's no way you can't beat the mighty Harrison. There's no way you can't build a bigger and better company than you can't take away everything you think belongs to you. My father stood up and his face was red with anger. My father stood up and turned red in the face, furious that you'd planned all of this. No, Dad. You planned this from the moment you decided that Jessica was more worthy of your trust, your love, your legacy, and he threatened that we'd have lawyers, and yes, I agreed. The same lawyers who'd helped me to arrange the deal, and it turned out that loyalty could be bought, and that's another lesson I've learned from you, that there was a deafening silence in the study, and that my mother was completely still, her hands clenched tightly together, and that she had no idea what she was getting into. Her hands clenched in her lap. Jessica looked like she might be sick, and my father. I stood up and said, "I suggest you take the weekend to come to terms with this, please." My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Olivia, we are your family. Where was this family when Dad kicked me out of the house, when Jessica took everything that was supposed to be ours? When I was trying to build my own business? You know what kept me going? I knew that one day I'd be strong enough to make you realize what you'd thrown away, that my father had finally found his voice. So this is revenge." "No, Dad, this is business. Didn't you always teach us not to let our emotions cloud your judgment?" I grabbed my briefcase. Harrison Tech was going out of business. Phoenix Industries could save it. In fact, I could do it. It was just, a lucky business opportunity. As I turned to leave, Jessica grabbed my arm. "Wait. What's going to happen to us, our jobs, for a moment?" I almost felt sorry for her. I said, "Would you fight for your position once?" They've seen the numbers and know that Harrison Tech can't survive without outside intervention. Well, the press release is ready for Tuesday after the meeting. The business papers are already speculating about a possible takeover, and your father's mismanagement and Jessica's failed product launches make it an easy sell. I ended the call and turned to find my mother standing in the doorway. She asked softly, "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" I had to answer that. "You all taught me that imperfection was unacceptable." She backed down. "We were wrong. Olivia was wrong about a lot of things. Yes, you were wrong. We were wrong. 15 years ago my father ruined my life. Make it up to my mom. Make it up to the company. Make it up to the family. There are some things that can't be made up for. They can only be rebuilt. And rebuilding requires change." Back in his study, my father walked over to his window. Back in the study, my father went to the window and gazed out at the garden where he had been teaching Jessica and me about the importance of Harrison's legacy. "What's your offer?" he asked, without looking back for the company. "It's all in the merger papers for the family." I paused. "That's even more complicated." Jessica looked up from the merger papers where she had been looking at them. "You're not going to fire everyone, are you? There are still people who are dependent on these jobs, unlike you. I actually care about my employees. I told you that any qualified person who is going to be fired is not going to be fired. I care about my employees, as I said. Anyone qualified and willing to adapt will have a place in the new organization. But there will be big changes, and so will we." She asked quietly, "It's up to you. Are you willing to start at the bottom, learn the business well, and prove that you deserve your position?" She nodded slowly. "I think I need to be good because it's your only option if you want to stay with a company." My father turned from the window and me. "Your years of experience are valuable, but you won't be running the company anymore." He opened his mouth to argue but closed it again. For the first time in my life, I saw Richard Harrison. "Accept defeat, 000 AM, I said. "Pack my things, and I suggest you all get ready." As I walked to the door, my mother called out to me, "Will you stay for dinner?" Over the next few days, Marcus kept me updated on the reaction of the board members, most of whom were enthusiastically in favor of the merger, seeing it as their best chance to salvage their investment. On Monday night, as I sat in my hotel room reviewing the final presentation, my cell phone rang with a text from Jessica. "Can we meet alone?" I wanted to ignore it, but something compelled me to reply to her. Lobby bar. 30 minutes later, when I arrived, she was already there with a glass of wine in her hand. "It looked expensive. Thank you for coming," she said. As I sat down, "What do you want?" Jessica took a deep breath, and all I wanted to say was that I'm sorry, not only for now but for the future. When Dad kicked you out of the house, I didn't stand up for you, and speaking up, I accepted everything without questioning it. I asked the bartender for a drink. "You're just now realizing that, aren't you?" She admitted that for years I've known that I was out of my mind and I wasn't cut out for this, but I was too proud and too afraid to admit it. "So you changed, and seeing everything you've built and how strong you've become, it made me realize what real leadership looks like." I researched my sister, looking for any signs of manipulation, but all I could see was fatigue and real remorse. "And you know what? I don't think things can ever go back to the way things were." And I finally said, "I know. I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want to learn. Really learn from the ground up. Will you teach me?" My father and my sister were sitting in the middle of them, and I was presenting to them the vision that Phoenix Industries had for the merged company, and I couldn't help but marvel at the symmetry of the moment. 15 years ago in this room, my father had told me that I didn't deserve to carry on the family business. And now I was showing him what he had thrown away. I underestimated you, and I was wrong. Yes, you were wrong. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I'm going to watch my daughter run the company I should have trusted her with 15 years ago. He said if she wanted to, it's not an apology, and it's not really an apology, but it's a start. 6 months later, I'm sitting in what used to be my father's office, and is now my second place of work when I'm in Boston. Jessica is presenting me with her analysis of a potential new product. She started as a junior analyst and analyzed potential new product lines. Market research showed strong demand, she concluded, but we needed to address production challenges. After the meeting, she lingered in the background, and I agreed with her. You've come a long way in 6 months thanks to you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me an opportunity I probably wouldn't have deserved. She smiled, a real smile, not the contrived one you get at social parties. Mom asked me to remind you about Sunday dinners in the last 6 months. I've only been to 2 family dinners. She replied quickly enough for dessert. She's making your French chocolate cake. I thought of our mothers trying to rebuild bridges with chocolate cake and Sunday dinners. I thought of my father holding back to learn from the daughter he once disliked. Jessica started at the bottom with no complaints. It was great, I texted back, but sitting there, looking at that old picture and thinking about Sunday dinners, I realized something important. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's giving them the opportunity to get better, even if it takes 15 years and a corporate takeover to get there.